called me Mary. He said, I am his. I am redeemed.
And it was so? Who did this?
I don't know his name. And even if I did, I could not tell you.
Why not?
His time for men to know has not yet come.
It's time for men. He performs miracles and seeks no credit? What does he look like? Is he a member of Sanhedrin? Would you at least know him if you saw him again?
I don't know why I am sharing this with you. I don't understand it myself. But here is what I can tell you. I was one way. And now I am completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him. So yes, I will know him for the rest of my life.
All right, The Chosen. Just for the record, I recommend it. Not to replace your Bible reading or study, but I do recommend it. I think they've done a good job with that. Anyway, so we're in a series, and we're in a series fleshing out some messages I did back in December. The first message I did in December was, and this is all around gifts that we ignore, gifts that we leave under the tree, gifts that we give very little value to. And the first one that I looked at was the Bible. And we looked at the Bible, how that was a gift given to us, and we just ignore it. You know, people have a family Bible, but it collects so much dust. You can tell how much dust is in your house by how much dust is on the family Bible. And after that, we looked at the first week in January. We looked at the idea of opening that Bible, cracking that code, simplifying the Bible. And we looked at casket empty. Casket empty. We said, and I'll just go through it for review so that you can stop people on the street and say, the casket is empty. Here's how I know, because that's what the Bible tells us. C is for creation. A is for Abraham. S, now, if you listen to the podcast, you'll know for sure S is Sinai, right? Not Sinai. Sinai is what I say when I'm not thinking, and Sinai is the name of the elementary school in Halifax County that a lot of my friends went to on Sinai Road. But Sinai is Sinai, it's from the time they left Egypt out of slavery up until the time of the kings. They were developing themselves as a nation. Then K is for kings. E is for exile. They're out of the land here. God is punishing them out of the land. All the promises, they're wondering, what's God going to do? How is this all going to be fulfilled? Then T is for temple, specifically the rebuilding of the temple, the second temple. But it covers kind of both temples when you think about the work there. Then empty. E is the hard one. Expectations. They're looking. It's the 430 years of silence. They're looking for something to happen. M is for Messiah. Messiah comes on the scene. P is for Pentecost. Just after what Allison read, just after this, the next chapter, chapter 2 of Acts, the Pentecost is the birth of the church. T is for teaching. All of those books that teach us things about how the church is to act, the purpose of the church. That's what we're talking about this morning, by the way. And then Y is for yet to come, the book of Revelation. There is so much more. There is so much more. Our hearts should be yearning for what's coming, because there's so much. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be like nothing ever that we can imagine. Eyes not hear, eyes not seen, ears not heard, the things that we are going to experience. So that was a couple of weeks when we looked at the Old Testament, New Testament, simplifying Scripture. Then we looked at prayer last week, and specifically, I told you the message that I preached in December was pretty good. I listened to it again. It basically delivered everything I wanted to deliver on that. Not everything that could be said, but I thought it did a really good job of bringing that through. And we looked at the Psalms and how the Psalms was the Old Testament prayer book. And some of you texted me this week, hey, I've started working through praying the Psalms, and I'm going to be very interested in you that texted me or emailed me. I'm going to be very interested a month from now. You saying, here's what I've learned about God. Here's what I've learned about myself. Here's what I've learned about my emotions through praying the Psalms. So this week, I want to call this Simplifying Church. And again, I listened to my message from December, Gifts Ignored Community, and I said basically everything I want to say about the church. I mean, that message is 39 minutes long. It is jam-packed with information to help you think about the church. But this morning, I'm going to in some ways, let me kind of put it this way. A lot of times my preaching is verse by verse, and we take a book and we see it in its context, and we understand the author's flow. This message is more theological, and it's going to help you think about the church. This morning, my goal is when you leave here, that you'll think about the church maybe just a little bit differently. You'll see its value, its purpose, and you'll have a little bit more discernment on how to judge a church. Because the question has come up in the last 50 years, and more recently, big time, why church? Why, is the church even relevant? Is it even needed? In fact, let me prove it to you. I want to go through, and I went through real quick. Oh, my daggone chainsaw almost broke my back. I want to share with you just some book titles. These are books that I haven't, and these are not all of them, meaning all the books on this topic. But this is one of the books that really affected me early in my ministry. It was written in the late 80s, early 90s. I could look up the copyright, but it's called The Church in Ruins. If you've ever heard of a guy named Larry Crabb, the psychologist, Larry Crabb's brother and another guy wrote this book, and a week after he was in the Air Force, and he was retired Air Force, but a week after he finished the manuscript on this book, he died in a plane crash. Larry Crabb's brother, William Crabb. Rise and Shine, a wake-up call to the church. That's Chuck Swindoll. Here you go. Can We Save the Evangelical Church by Bill Hull. So you get the idea. The church in ruins, a wake-up call to the church. Can we save the evangelical church? You kind of get an idea. I'm going to leave this for last. You kind of get an idea that the church might be in trouble. Dying for change. An arresting look at the new realities confronting churches and parachurch ministries. Actually written by a pastor. The Life-Giving Church. Oh, this has some hope. By a guy in California, in Colorado, who ended up being, who failed in ministry. Let me just put it that way. He's no longer in the pastorate. Head of the evangelicals. And just, anyway. Rediscovering Church. Prepare your church for the future. Rechurching the unchurched. The unchurched are coming back. Let me go on and finish this. Sharpening the focus of the church, because the church is out of focus. It kind of looks blurry. Why is the church here? The church is looking for a role to fill. We're here. What can we do? Well, okay, if that's solved, do they go out of business? No, where else do we plug in? So sharpening the focus of the church. 12 keys to an effective church. Meaning the idea here is there are churches that are not effective. And then this one, I guess it's probably, I'm guessing this is 20 years old, 15 years old. The Simple Church. Simple Church. I want us to kind of look at this morning and think through kind of how we got here. And I want to speak about it from a denominational standpoint, honestly. And I want to talk about the good things and how the good things set up the bad things. So for most of us, we are a product of two wars. Two wars affected us. More affected us, but two wars specifically. World War II. Some of you are old enough to remember World War II. And the Vietnam War. In World War II, we had to do things. It was the last war that I say just completely permeated our culture. We were having to do things. People were having to work jobs that never had to work. It was disruptive to our culture. And the churches were filled. And they were full because, quite frankly, we understood we needed God's help to win that war. We knew it was good versus evil. And we had no idea the atrocities of the evil, just how bad it was, but we got to see that. So after that war, we have people come back, and we have them having babies, and we have baby boomers. And they come back, and we feel there's a certain obligation, and I'm talking about not individually, but as a culture, we feel, our prayers have been answered. Yes, some loved ones didn't come back, but many did. But more than anything else, we won the war. Right versus wrong, won the war. And so there was this obligation. And during this time, several denominations grew. The Baptists, the Presbyterians, and the Methodists. I mean, if you want to build a church, if you want to create a church during this time in the late 40s, early 50s, you do the Field of Dreams. You build it, they will come. You go buy property, you put up a building, open the doors. We're open for business, and people will come in. There were shifts in demography. Our demographics shifted from different places. There was a move to California that was kind of real big. From the East Coast to the West Coast. There were all kinds of things happening. Churches needed to be built. When you think about planting a church, some of the innovators were like Robert Schuller. He said, "Why do we need a building?" Schuller said, just open, let's go to the drive-in theater. They're not using it in the middle of the day. Drive-in, everybody's looking at it. You used to pull your car up, and there was a big screen, and there's this box, and, your parents would take you there, and you'd be in the back saying, "I can't hear." There's one speaker this way, but there's a big screen. And they would do church, and churches grew, and there was a little bit of innovation, but there wasn't the necessity to be a lot of innovation, because, quite frankly, our culture was primed to be responsive to God. Vietnam came, and things kind of, people say, "Okay, what's going on with this war?" And it's easy from hindsight to say things, but when you're going, you question it. And there were a lot of people that said, "Yeah, I don't want to go to war. And so I've got to stay in school." Well, what do you want to do? Well, why don't I go to seminary? I'm not joking here. And so our seminaries were flooded with people, not everybody, but there was this move, I don't want to go to war, so I'm going to go to seminary. A lot of people would go to seminary. And they would end up coming out, and they started filling these churches, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist churches. And when you ask what they believed, they didn't believe a whole lot. They could dispute a whole lot of things that were going on. And so the whole church and the whole drive for church ended up kind of, we never went to church. I can tell you, as a little boy, this is no lie, and I've said this before, but as a little boy, I used to, on Sunday morning, we did not go to church. And I can remember people dressed up going to church, and I would hide behind a tree. I'm not kidding. I'd hide behind a tree because I knew if they saw me, they were going to go to church and tell God that I wasn't in church. As a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, that's kind of the thing, And so then my mom said, either we're going to have to cry out to God or something to keep this marriage, to raise these kids, these 2 boys. We got to do something. So we started going to church. And there I heard a message. But it wasn't real clear. It was kind of a mucky message. Then I went to live with my uncle for a while because the horses and things like that. And then I went to a church that was what I call country church. It was what I would call not a very educated church. And you'd hear the same message Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. You must be born again. You must be born again. But in that simple message, I heard the message that God wanted us to know. And it was so simplified. It was the witnessing that was going on. In fact, bring up Matthew 28. Jesus had said this. Then Jesus came to them. This is right before the conversation that happened in Acts. And he said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, because you have all authority, it's been given to Jesus. He says, the result of that, I'm going to give you something to do. I'm going to give you a purpose. I'm going to give you a job to do. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. He's kind of giving them, he's casting a vision that there's going to be a witness to what he's done, his death and his resurrection. There's going to be a witness to that's going to happen. And there's going to be this organization that's going to be developed around that idea, around that concept, around that reality. And so what ended up happening was people ended up trying to find out how to do church. There were two things happening. On the one hand, there are ministers trying to figure out, okay, how do we do church? And on the other hand, there were consumers, there were people looking for a church saying, okay, what do I want in a church? I mean, somebody told me 2 weeks ago there's a church that's putting in a spa. You know? And you can go to Baptist churches with, and there, look, nothing wrong. That doesn't say in the Bible, thou shalt not have basketball courts in church, you know. But it became more of this thing of, okay, how can we get people in here? And there became a split even among preachers and in denominations because people would say, oh, they're compromising. Well, are they compromising? Are they really just because they have a basketball court, does that mean they're compromising? Or are they trying to market? And so there was this whole question of wondering, you know, what is the church? How do I gauge a church? How do I judge a church? How do I know if a church is the right, that church is, if it's doing what the New Testament told me to do? What the Bible teaches us to do. In fact, I've been accused because you see a contemporary video clip. Now, The Chosen was not a contemporary video clip. But when I've shown a video clip to start my sermons, I've literally had pastors tell me, friends that disagree with me, they say, why are you bringing the world into the church? So if I show a video clip from something like The Matrix or something like that, I say, why? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? And back when our technology wasn't as good and we used VHS, one time I played a clip. And it was from Family Man. And the clip was great. The problem is on VHS tapes, they go back a little further. And when they go back a little further, in the scene, there were words that were dropped. And there's people, I don't know if it was James or Scott Sykes, somebody, they were having a hard time breathing because I was sucking all the oxygen out of the room. And they're saying that he's going to go for every word that's ever mentioned in movies, in R-rated movies. You know. So we've had those. We've had that. But the accusation against me is, why are you bringing the world into the church? And my answer is just the opposite of that. When people come to church, I want them to see the God's truth and the questions that come up. They're out there all around. They see them in movies. They read them in books. The human experience is all around them. And I want them to connect the human experience with a God that loves them. But people have different ideas about what's church. I had friends of mine, dear friends of mine, that we had been friends for a long time. And some of you have been with me and you've met friends that don't go to church that are friends of mine. You know, I don't understand pastors who well, I do understand it. I'm just thinking out loud here. Who the only friends they have is in church. Because quite frankly, those are not friends for a lot of pastors. And that's why a lot of pastors' families are screwed up. Because they have no friends. And some of you meet friends of mine that don't go to church. And they're friends, and I love them, and we get along just great. But I've had friends of mine who went to church, and then they visited our church. And we are still friends to this day. And so I'm always, I'm always wanting feedback. What did you think? What was your first experience like? What was it? What struck you? And so I asked them, I said, what was it about church? What did you like? And I could tell they didn't want to hurt my feelings. Like my feelings have never been hurt. And they said, well, you just didn't step on our toes. We came to church and we didn't feel like you had hit us enough. Because that's what they look at. Their measure of what a church should be is I go to church and I get all this guilt heaped on me, and then I leave feeling like crud. Now I've been to church. Give me my graphic up here. I want to show you, this is a friend of mine. He's an evangelist. God is not trying to scare you out of hell with bad news, but invite you into heaven with good news. That's a fundamentally different way that I think about what God's love is extended. And some churches, it's like they're trying to scare you out of hell. Hell's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. It's going to be horrible. You're going to be separated from God. And that is, while that is true, the fact of the matter, there's a much more compelling reason. It's God's love. It's an invitation to you. So people have different ideas of what they're looking for in a church. And this morning, I want to give you an illustration. It's an illustration by another friend of mine. We were thick as thieves in seminary. He pastors actually 2 churches, one in California, one in Bangkok he oversees. And he has this illustration, and I want to, and once I give you this illustration, then I'll start my sermon, okay? I want to give you, so let's take this thing right here. Let me get the thing off. Okay, hang on one second. We pause for this message from our sponsor. Okay, so. Okay, I have filled this up with water. Okay, and look, isn't that pretty? That is a pretty glass. It's the prettiest one I can find in our house. And so I guess it's a salad dispenser or something. It has water in it. So it's got water. This water is life-giving. It's good. It tastes good. Trust me, it's good. But suppose if I took and put the water in here. Okay? It looks different. It looks different because it's in a different jar. You probably wouldn't confuse those. Suppose if I put the water in here. Those look very different. But they are just containers. The water's the same. The church and the message of the church needs to be like this water. The church needs to be liquid. It needs to know what it is. It needs to know what its job is, its purpose is. Rick Warren wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Church. The church that understands why God has her in existence. And it goes into cultures and it fills out those cultures differently. Some of you I've talked to, because some of you are from, say, a Catholic background. And I got to tell you, I enjoy a Catholic church service. I can handle it about once every year or 2 years. You know, because I come in there and I'm real quiet, you know, and I sit down and there's, you know, and there's things going on and it's quiet and, you know, and I understand it. I don't know exactly when to stand, but I kind of follow everybody along. And it's a proper church service, and I understand. It's not relaxed. Some of you are from a charismatic background. And baby, let's rock and roll. Let's run up and down the aisles. Let's have a good time. You know, theologically, the difference in those two, it's the difference in high church and low church. High church is about God is transcendent. He is over and above. We have to approach Him in a way that honors Him, that is in awe of Him. And the others say, God has come to us. God is right here. God is with us. And neither one is right and wrong. A lot of it has to do with personality. We're going to look at that here in just a second. But the whole idea is different churches, as long as they have the liquid, can worship a holy God in different ways, as long as it's in spirit and in truth. Okay? Let me tell you what's happened, though, recently. What's happened recently is this. we end up saying, okay, this is what church is. Church is always this way. And then we find something to put in there. And we will put a substitute liquid in there. Sometimes they even look the same. When I was preparing this, I was thinking about this. Right next door to me, is me and my brother. And I guess I'm like 11 years old. And, kids, there were no computers. So we didn't stay inside all day. From the time we got dressed and got out of the house, our parents wouldn't see us till dark. That's just the way it was. And so my neighbors had asked me, hey, can I watch their 3-year-old boy? And they had a fence and everything. They were just going to run to the store. And so they hollered for me because I said, yeah, but we were playing and playing. And I come into their house. This is a house I own today. I come into their house, and on the counter, there's this jar of water. And it was not water. It burns us, precious. It burns us. And I went, that ain't water. That ain't water. So I know what gin tastes like. I'm just saying, I know what gin tastes like. It looked like it, but it was not it. Now suppose if it was a different color. Suppose if there was gravy in there. You say, yeah, that ain't water. But here's what happens. People become so infatuated with the package that they don't care what's inside. And so you've got churches that have a form of godliness. You have churches that, hey, you better not sing anything that was written after 1920. You got churches that do all of these things. They do the structure thing. But what's inside? You could go to that church for 3 years and never hear the gospel. You could go there and never hear the gospel because what they've done is they've said the important thing is the package. The important thing is the liquid. It's what's inside. And it's going to take its shape. Now, I want you to look at a Bible verse, and I want to show you why this is difficult at some point. Philippians, Paul is writing the church at Philippi, and he says this, but I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother. And here's what look at the three things, the three categories he puts him in. My brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. Paul thinks about Epaphroditus this way. He thinks of him as a brother. He's in a family. When you come to the witness of Christ, the fact that Christ has died on the cross, He's defeated death, He's risen from the grave, and we believe that. If you knew the gift and the giver, remember John chapter 4, if you knew the gift and the giver, you have eternal life. When we come to eternal life, God brings us into His family. And as a family, we got brothers and sisters. And Paul says we are part of a family. We're part of a community that way, if you think about it. We are thick. We are thick as a family. And family can get on each other's nerves. Do you know one of the things that happens in a marriage, one of the things they've looked at just from an observatory way, they've observed that after 2 years, the thrill is gone. In other words, the buzz that you get from that person, after 2 years, the thrill is gone. They become kind of normal after 2 years. Do you know that same thing happens in church? You go to a church and it's, it's exciting. Man, I've never heard this. This is great. I'm listening. I'm growing on. And then after 2 years, you go, yeah, I don't know about this. God's calling me elsewhere. And people move. You can track it. There are people that move from church to church every 2 years. There are denominations that do this, that move their pastors every 3 years somewhere. Because it's kind of getting old. Do you know, it's after the 2 years you start really growing. It's after the 2 years you don't fall in love. You start working at love. You start nurturing love. You start caring about it. And it's the same thing in the church. The church is a family, and sometimes we can get in on each other's nerves. My brother and I was fighting, and this happened a lot. And Mom's trying to break us up. She said, y'all quit it. I'm going to tell your daddy when your daddy gets home, y'all quit it. And she said, and she's just yelling at us and everything. And then there used to be this thing where you didn't have a phone on your hip. It used to be where the phone was on the counter on the wall. And the phone would ring and Mama would go, "I'm Daisy, when your dad goes, hello." And the idea here is with family, we're just, blah, 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 blah. But with outsiders, hello, we got our act together. We're so perfect, you know. So when you come into church, that's going to preach the message of Christ and going to try to grow you and make you into a disciple and teaching you to obey all things He's commanded, sometimes there's people that get on your nerves. It's people. But you're a family. You come in and you become part of a family. You challenge each other. It's family because ultimately you don't want to. We shouldn't be about tearing each other down. We should be about encouraging each other, growing each other, helping each other out. Paul saw the church as a family, as a community. But he also says, my coworker. He saw it as a business. He saw it as a corporation. That there's work, there's responsibility involved. You know, the things that I hate about the church are corporation stuff. God has blessed this church with people who will worry about things that I don't worry about. You know, and there are things that most of your churches, what they ended up, they became corporations. And they became their identity came from the corporation or the corporate. I've literally had churches give me their flow chart. This person reports to this person. This person reports to this person. This person, you know, and it's go, what? What about the mission? What about the purpose of the church? What about the liquid? No, but isn't our glass pretty? No, what about it looking like this? That glass is going to hell. Why? Because it looks different. There's no way that could be a church. No, a church got to look like this. There's a sense in which a church is a family. It's a company or a corporation. But then he says, my fellow soldier. Think about a soldier taking a hill. They've got a cause. They've got a reason to exist. And a church should have all these dynamics. And if you are looking at how can I understand and how can I grow in a church? Some churches you're going to go, they're all family. There are some churches in this community, in every community, you can go to, you can give the most money, you can serve on the most committees, but you know what? You'll still be an outsider. You know why? Because their great-great-great-great-grandpappy started that church. And it's a family church. Some churches you'll go to and all they talk about is money, 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 money. Business, 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 building, building, building. And some people are attracted to that. And there's some churches that talk to you, we got to win people for Christ, reach people for Christ. The world's going to hell. We got to reach people for Christ. And they're constantly banging that drum. All three of these things have to happen at some level. But what can't be done away with is the liquid. It's the message. The message. And God gives you and me this new life. What happened between then and now is Jesus. I was talking to somebody 2 weeks ago. And it was somebody who their job is in the spiritual realm. I'm going to put it that way. Their job is in the spiritual realm. To minister mercy-wise in the spiritual realm. And I told them I was a pastor and everything. And it could have been for that reason. It could have been that they knew where I was coming from. But the person probably had the same degree that I had. But the name Jesus never came up in the conversation. And it wasn't that we were talking about golf or something else. We were talking about the spiritual needs of people. And the name Jesus never came up. And if you go to a church that's all about causes, they have this cause and that cause, and Jesus never comes up, I'm not sure they've met that requirement of existence. That's why they run to say, well, what are we doing here? Never forget, Jesus gave us the authority to go and make disciples. He said He's not bringing in the kingdom just yet, but instead we're going to be witnesses to what He did, to His defeat of death. And we should strive to go to a church that's going to teach us God's Word, that's going to encourage us, that's going to realize the reality of this journey. And so today, navigating church, you'll say, how do I pick a church? What's the budget? How many programs do they have? I had somebody tell me one time, this was years ago, they were saying, they were friends of mine, they've moved to another city, and said, we're really trying to find a church, and the number one thing they're looking for is youth program. And here's what I told them, because they want their kids to know Christ. Great. And I said, you know what will help your kids come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ quicker than anything else? It's what happens in that home. It's what happens in that home. Don't send your kids to church and say the church is going to straighten them out. The church is going to give them Jesus. You give them Jesus. People have all different ideas on how to shop for a church. You need to find a church that knows its purpose. And that purpose is from the Bible. And it's really as simple as that. I go to a good church. Why is it a good church? Because look how many people go to it. It's got to be a good church. There's a lot of people go to it. I know churches that are running less than 25 people that I would call a good church. I know churches that are running thousands, that when I hear what comes out of the pulpit, it makes my skin crawl. I said, they're talking spiritually, but where's Jesus? Where's the simple life of Jesus? Where's the simple celebration of what He's done? Where is it? Simple church. You can see why it's complex, but don't forget it's the liquid. It's the liquid. It's the liquid. Do you know what God did for us? We were in that church in Chattanooga that we loved. I mean, I went from one university to another. We loved that church. We did not want to leave that church. Oh, God, please let us just stay here. Well, I wanted to go to seminary. But, in fact, a guy that had graduated from Dallas Seminary, Bob, not Webster, Bob, you probably know who I'm talking about. Anyway, he came to me, he says, Rod, if you wait and leave 2 months later, I will have you ready to take your Greek exam, your baby Greek exam. And I said, I love this church. And then I go to Dallas. And everybody's telling me, man, you're going to have your pick of churches in Dallas. You're going to have any church. You got First Baptist Dallas, W.A. Criswell, the pastor. I'd see him in the YMCA. Dr. Criswell, hello, handsome. And he just, these are great men of God. Dr. Criswell, Billy Graham considered him his pastor, And the other guy, that George W. Truett, these are great men of God who used to pastor that church. All this tradition, all of these churches, and we went there and we kept comparing it. No, it's not like Woodland Park. It's not like Woodland Park. It's not like Woodland Park. And God ends up putting us in a church that's a Gothic church, that's a traditional church in every way, shape, or form. And we were there for 4 years. And that church was so different than we were. But God used that church. In fact, that church ordained me. I thought I was going to go back to Woodland Park and be ordained there. But that church ordained me into ministry. And I thank God for that church. A lot of times God gives you something you need rather than what you want. And as you are looking, and as you're evaluating, is this a good church? What's inside? What's inside? I was like, yeah, I like Rod because he shows video clips. What's inside? What's the message? What's the message? To know the living God because of what Christ did on the cross. Wow. To have the future we have as a family, as a business, as a cause, as an army for God. and to know what the future holds. Wow, to encourage each other. Because I cannot imagine doing this alone. I cannot imagine doing it without you. And I hope you can't imagine doing it without each other. That's the encouragement. To do simple church. Don't get caught up in the canister, in the looks of that. Because what we end up doing, we end up putting more emphasis on the outside, on the structure. You know what they did with 7-Up? They ended up changing. They ended up putting a little bit more yellow on the outside of the 7-Up can. They changed the color a little bit. They yellowed it a little bit. Did not change what was inside one iota. And you know what most people said? They've added more lemon. They've added more lemon. Be able to look beyond the package and see the life of Christ, offering forgiveness, mercy, and hope. Just like Mary talking to Nicodemus. I was one way, and now I'm another. And what happened in between was Jesus. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your love, for your forgiveness, and thank you for your calling to not redeem us and leave us alone, but to put us together into a family, into a corporation, and to give us a purpose, a cause, to tell others about the saving message of Jesus Christ. Help us to just keep it that simple. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hi, friends. I'm Olivia.
I'm Rod.
And you're listening to Just One More Thing from Sunrise Church. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Just One More Thing from Sunrise Church. In today's episode, we are covering the January 28th sermon titled Simplifying Church. And like the rest of the sermons in this current series, this ties back to a sermon that you did back in December called Gifts Neglected Community. Similar to prayer, you looked back at that sermon and figured, well, I kind of said all I wanted to in that area, which, if I remember correctly, that was more why we need to be in church, the importance of gathering as believers, the importance of community for the believer. This one was directed more from inside to the outside. So this was like, here's the purpose of the church, not why we need to gather in, but why we need to kind of, I guess, go from the inside out. Is that a fair way to describe it?
I think so. The number one thing I wanted to do was make people aware that there is a question about, is the church still relevant? And, different authors see a problem with the church by demonstrating that the church is dying, what the church needs to change. What does that change look like? And I really wanted to give people an inside look at how do people go about choosing the church? What's important? That's where I was going with that. So people would leave there to be able to tell their friends or even themselves what's really important about church, how God has called it into existence, and it has a mission to witness. So you could say that, I think that's a good way to put it. It was kind of an inside-out look at the church.
And you used a really good visual aid in explaining how different churches might look different. You talked about Catholics and charismatics, like that visually, and your experience of going to these places, that'll look very differently. But the inside needs to be the same in that the message that they are giving, the teaching, the core of what the church is should be consistent no matter what denomination, no matter what location the church is in. And the way you did that was with 3 different jars, and you filled it with water and said that the water's the same no matter what the jar looks like. Where did you get that illustration? I know you referenced that you got it from someone, but can you say again where you got that illustration?
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine in seminary, Dave Gibbons. He pastors New Song Church in California. And Dave calls it liquid leadership. And that's the first person I've ever heard that used that type of illustration. And so he says, water takes the form of the container it's in, just like Christianity and the message of Christ must account for the culture in which she finds herself. So that might look very different from the outside, but you've got to make sure the inside stays right, that the message stays right, that we are witnessing to the death and resurrection of Jesus and the gift that's offered, to believe in the gift and the giver, that we can have eternal life. So yeah, my friend Dave Gibbons is the one that I first thought about that illustration from.
So you wanted me to ask you about brandy, and I don't know why I'm asking this, but what's the deal with brandy?
So I'm listening. I'd read parts of the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and one of the things he talks about in there is something called sensation transference. And he uses an illustration in there about a brandy company, Christian Brothers Brandy Company. They wanted to see why they were slipping in market share. And so they hired this company to go about and survey, to do like a taste test and those types of things. Doing a taste test straight on, a blind taste test, both of the brandies, that and I think it's called E&J, that was their main competitor, they scored about the same. And they ended up giving taste tests where they knew the brand, but it was just the bottle. It wasn't the name. It was just the bottle. E&J did really well on that taste test. And so what they ended up doing was switching bottles. They put the one brandy by Christian Brothers in the E&J bottle and the E&J brandy in the Christian Brothers bottle. And in that test, the Christian Brothers brandy won running away. And the point of the story is this. As much as we would like to think about what's the inside, what the liquid is, we cannot help but make a judgment based on what we see on the outside. So what I was really trying to get people to think through there is when they look for a church and when they're trying to decide about church, what kind of package is that in? I think God calls us to be relevant, to be with our culture, to try to communicate with our culture, but to never change the insides of the package, the liquid, as it were. But the outside does make a difference, and it does influence us. So that's the problem that the church has. When people have the idea of church, a lot of times they can go to something that's very traditional on the outside, but a lot of churches, the inside has changed. The message of Christ has changed. Their traditions are the same as they were maybe 60 years ago. But in order to gain an audience, they have changed the message. And I think that completely violates what we are called to do. Our methods have to be flexible. Our package can look different, but we must maintain the integrity of the insides of the message of Christ. So that's what I was trying to do. And then off of that, I went to talk about Epaphroditus in Philippians 2:25 and how Paul viewed him as a member of a family, my brother, as a kind of a business person. They're in a work together. He says, my co-laborer. And then a fellow soldier. In other words, someone given a task, having to go through hard times to complete the task. And that concept came back in the 90s. I heard that from a guy named Jim Dethmer about the church as a community, a cause, or a corporation. And each church will have a different emphasis on that. And that lines up with our personalities by and large. But I wanted to keep front and center the message of Christ that cannot change, the liquid, as it were.
Can I ask a loaded question?
Absolutely.
So a lot of the books that you brought up in your example, just talking about how this is a very, I guess, relevant topic in, what is the status of the church? What is the church here for? how much does the church need to change, things like that. Some of the books that you brought up, I think, were from the 80s through
Today.
closer to today. And so it seems like this has been a problem for a long time. So I guess my question is, one, I think those books specifically talked about the American church.
Yes.
Okay, so do you think that the American church is in that state where it is kind of in ruins or it's dying like some of those books talked about? I'll let you answer that first, and then I have a follow-up.
Yes, I do believe that's the case. I believe God gave us a moment to come back to him, to get our attention after 9/11. And I believe what happened was people went into the church expecting to hear from God, and what they saw was that the church had not changed from their childhood or before from their grandparents' childhood. And so they gave up on that. I mean, church attendance went through the roof the first couple of weeks after 9/11, and then it drifted off very quickly after that. So I think the church is asking a lot of questions. And what I'm seeing is people desperate for relevance. They are desperate to prove the church relevance. And so they start compromising in areas. And one of the areas they compromise in is the message. You can go to a church and go there for 4 weeks in a row and maybe never hear the name Jesus. And why are we a church if it's not about Jesus? But that's the drift of organizations. They come with a purpose, and then after a while, they end up drifting away. You know, on the one hand, you say, well, it doesn't matter if you have a message if no one's going to hear that. But on the other hand, if you've got a lot of people there to hear it and you can't give them a message of life, then what use is it? So the church is really struggling right now, the church in America. And they're getting involved in causes that really, I guess they see it as maybe helping on this side of eternity. But that we're called to look far beyond just this side of eternity.
So having said that, where do you think the, I guess, weakest link in the chain is that would actually make a difference if we fix that? I know you mentioned that during the Vietnam era, a lot of people, to avoid going to Vietnam, went into seminary. And then after that, you have basically a whole generation of people who, like you said, knew a lot, but didn't really have any beliefs or, I guess, concern about what they were learning. And so that obviously causes a lot of problems. Is it that link where we need stronger people with conviction coming out of the education side of things? Is it that people within church currently, just regular congregants, don't really have the fire and passion to change their church or to get involved? Where do you think is the point where the person listening to this can actually act and help fix this?
That is a fantastic question. I think the church has a full court press against it at the moment. On the one hand, you can see the problem in the pulpit. And the problem in the pulpit is one of authority. What authority does a person have to get up and speak the message of Christ? If the authority is anything other than the Word of God, then we're in trouble, because that gets on a slippery slope real fast. And a lot of guys are very talented in their communication skill, but that's as far as it goes. You know, when Jesus spoke, when he preached the Sermon on the Mount, at the very end of that, they said he was unlike other preachers. He was unlike other rabbis or speakers because he spoke as one having authority. Where does our authority come from? From the Word of God. And I think from the pulpit side, we have left the authority of God's Word. Big problem. On the other side, we have church members that don't know the Word. They don't know how to evaluate a pastor. In the early 80s, I was talking to a gentleman who was on a pulpit committee. This is while I was still in college. And I'd never really talked to anybody on a pulpit committee. What are you looking for? What are the questions? This was like a big mystery to me. And this gentleman told me that what they were concerned about was how often did this pastor believe that his grass should be cut? What time did he think he should come to work? office hours. Those were the things that they were concerned about. I asked him, I said, well, what about theology? He said, oh, we don't ask him anything about theology because we assume that the seminary has fixed all that. Well, the seminary hadn't fixed all that. And so I think, you've got a 1-2 punch. There's a problem in the pulpit. There's a problem in the pew. And the American church is suffering from that. At the same time, there are more resources to be able to understand the Word of God than there's ever been. I mean, I said it a few weeks ago. Basically, a person can get about 70% of what you and I got in seminary now. I mean, the knowledge is out there, and people are hungry. And when people hear something from the Word of God, it's like life-giving water to them. And so while the church is in danger, it seems like bright lights are shining, and those lights stick out with the Word of God.
I think that's a very encouraging answer to know that, yes, the current situation, those books were right. It is a little grim in some ways. But like you said, there's home churches springing up that are very strong. There's other resources, things that are becoming more available that are very strong. So, yeah, I think as long as we, like you said, stick with the liquid, make sure the liquid, the message, the core of it is good, then we can turn this thing around.
Amen. And, I would encourage people to look for a Free Grace Church. If they want to know how to find one of those, they can go to faithalone.org and look at their church tracker. And I just find that theology very consistent, and it can handle all of the questions in the Bible.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that a little further and going through those examples. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Just One More Thing from Sunrise Church.